Have you ever felt a strange kind of ache, one that doesn't show up on scans or go away with medicine? It's not just sadness or loneliness, it's something deeper, quieter, more haunting, a spiritual emptiness that creeps in even when you're surrounded by people. You feel disconnected, almost invisible. The world moves on, and you're left asking a painful question that echoes in the silence. Why me? If this sounds like you, know this: you are not broken, you are not forgotten. In today's video, we'll explore a powerful truth that most people overlook, that your deepest loneliness may actually be a sacred invitation. This isn't just about emotional pain, it's about what that pain is pointing you toward. You'll discover why this season of solitude is not a punishment, but a portal. A carefully orchestrated phase in your soul's journey that's designed to lead you towards something far more meaningful than comfort: awakening. We'll unpack the hidden purpose behind your isolation and how to shift your perspective so that the silence becomes your teacher, not your enemy. By the end of this video, your solitude will no longer feel like a glitch in your life. It will feel like a turning point. You'll begin to see your loneliness not as a void, but as a mirror, a sacred mirror reflecting back the parts of you that are ready to be seen, healed, and reborn. And through that understanding, you'll reclaim your power. This video will help you move from confusion to clarity, from aching to awakening. It's not just about surviving the silence, it's about rising from it. Number 1. Solitude as a sacred space, the silent alchemy of becoming. There comes a time in every soul's journey when the world seems to fall away. The chatter fades, the invitations dry up, and suddenly you're left with a silence so thick it feels like a second skin. At first, this solitude can feel like abandonment, as if life has turned its back on you, choosing to bless others with connection and joy while leaving you behind in a desert of quiet. But what if that perception is not only incomplete but entirely wrong? What if this silence, this aching stillness, is not a punishment but a portal? Carl Jung, one of the most influential voices in modern psychology, didn't merely tolerate solitude, he revered it. In Jung's philosophy, isolation was never something to be avoided or cured. Instead, it was to be honored, respected, and even welcomed. He saw solitude as a sacred container, a crucible in which the soul is refined, stripped of its masks, and confronted with its truest self. To Jung, loneliness was not a meaningless void but a meaningful initiation, a rite of passage into the deeper layers of human consciousness. When we are alone, truly alone, without distractions or validations, we are forced to meet the parts of ourselves we often bury beneath busy schedules, social roles, and the opinions of others. The ego begins to loosen its grip. The carefully curated version of who we thought we were starts to dissolve. What remains is something raw, tender, and infinitely more real. This is the fertile ground of self-discovery not found in the noise of the crowd, but in the sacred hush of solitude. It's easy to look around and feel forgotten when your phone no longer rings and your inbox remains empty. It's tempting to believe you've been cast aside while others thrive. But spiritual awakening rarely begins in the center of the crowd. Often, it starts at the very edge of belonging. It starts when the distractions fall away and you are left with nothing but your breath, your heartbeat, and the weight of your own thoughts. This is not rejection, it is redirection, a divine invitation to turn inward, to listen to the quiet voice of your own soul. Those who are being called to a higher path are often asked to walk it alone, not because they are unworthy of companionship, but because their transformation cannot be heard over the noise. Silence becomes the sacred tuning fork through which truth begins to hum, and that truth, once heard, changes everything. The soul cannot be rushed. Its language is slow, sacred, and subtle. That is why solitude is required not as exile, but as a womb for rebirth. In this space, the alchemy begins. The wounded parts are acknowledged, the suppressed dreams reawaken. The fragmented pieces of your identity begin to reorganize themselves into a whole, and most importantly, your purpose, the one that cannot be dictated by society or shaped by approval, starts to glow softly at the center of your being. You remember who you are, not who you were told to be, not who others needed you to be, but who you've always been beneath the layers of noise and conditioning. Solitude is not the absence of love, it is the preparation for it. It is the place where you learn to love yourself so completely that you no longer chase what does not serve you. It is where you begin to discern between connection and codependency, between attention and authenticity. In this sacred space, your soul expands. You are no longer seeking company just to fill a void. You are becoming the kind of presence that transforms every room you enter, not because you demand to be seen, but because you have learned to see yourself. So, if you find yourself walking this quiet path, know that it is not a detour, it is the way. If you are aching in the silence, trust that something within you is being reshaped. Trust that solitude is not your enemy, but your oldest spiritual ally. You are not being forgotten, you are being initiated. Before we move deeper into this sacred journey, take a moment to reflect on what solitude has meant in your own life. Have you ever felt that quiet ache, only to later realize it was shaping you into someone wiser, stronger, and more aligned with your truth? If this message resonates with your soul, let us know in the comments, share your experience, or simply affirm your journey by typing, "My solitude is sacred." Your story might be the light someone else needs to hear. And if you're finding comfort, clarity, or strength in this video, please take a second to like it. It helps us reach more hearts walking the same path. Let's continue. The next part may reveal what your soul has been waiting for. Number 2, the mirror of loneliness, a portal to transformation. We often think of loneliness as something to be avoided at all costs, a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. In a world that glorifies constant connection and celebrates those who are always surrounded by others, being alone is often mistaken for failure. But what if we've been seeing it all wrong? What if loneliness is not a punishment, but a sacred invitation? Not a breakdown, but a breakthrough waiting to happen. From a deeper psychological and spiritual lens, loneliness is not rejection, it is preparation. Life, in its infinite wisdom, sometimes pulls us away from the crowd not to hurt us, but to refine us. It clears the noise not to silence us, but to help us hear the one voice we've forgotten to listen to, our own. When we are stripped of external validation, of constant companionship, of the distractions that once filled our days, we come face to face with a reflection we often avoid: the true self. That still, quiet version of us that holds the unhealed wounds, the unanswered questions, and the untapped brilliance. This is where the real work begins. Think of the mystics, visionaries, and spiritual pioneers who shaped the world, not through loud declarations, but through silent transformation. Jesus didn't find his calling in the temple or among the crowds. He found it during 40 days of isolation in the desert, where the silence revealed the strength of his spirit. The Buddha didn't awaken during royal feasts or public speeches, but under a tree, alone with his mind, battling the illusions of the ego. Carl Jung didn't shape modern psychology by staying in the safety of textbooks. He turned inward, into the chaos of his own subconscious, emerging with insights that reshaped how we understand the soul. Their solitude was not escape, it was initiation. They did not run from the quiet. They sat in it. They faced it. They let it burn through the layers of illusion until what remained was something pure, unshakable, and true. Loneliness is not an error in the system of life. It is the crucible in which truth is forged. It is not a detour on the spiritual path, it is the path. The discomfort we feel in that silence is not a warning sign. It is the heat of transformation. It is the fire that burns away the masks we've worn and the roles we've played. And only when we are willing to stay in that heat without reaching for distraction or escape, can we truly begin to see who we are becoming. So, if you are in a season of solitude, if the silence feels heavy and the nights stretch long, take heart. You are not being punished, you are being purified. You are not being abandoned. You are being prepared for something more sacred than the world can currently offer. This mirror of loneliness does not show you your failures. It shows you your becoming. And in that reflection, beneath the ache and the absence, there is something luminous waiting to emerge: your truest, most awakened self. Number 3, the unfolding of individuation, becoming the whole self. Solitude, at first, does not feel sacred. It can feel like drowning in a sea of your own thoughts. The external world grows quiet, but inside, a storm begins to rise. Thoughts you've long suppressed begin to surface with a vengeance. Old wounds reopen, memories resurface, and the emotions you've kept locked away, grief, rage, confusion, begin to claw at your awareness like ghosts demanding to be seen. This is not a breakdown. This is the beginning of something profound. What Carl Jung called individuation, the sacred and often agonizing process of becoming your true, integrated self. Not the version of you that society applauds, not the mask you wear to keep your family comfortable or your friends reassured, but the version that has been quietly waiting beneath the surface. Raw, unfiltered, authentic. Individuation is not about self-improvement. It's not about striving to become a better person in the eyes of the world. It's about uncovering the whole of who you are, the light and the shadow. And the shadow, for most of us, is where the journey truly begins. Here in the silence of solitude, the shadow begins to emerge, not as a monster to be feared, but as a lost child wanting to be held. The shadow holds all the parts of you that were once rejected by others, and eventually by yourself. Your anger, your jealousy, your fear, your shame. These are not sins to be exiled, but signals of where love never reached. They are invitations to deepen your self-understanding and extend compassion inward. You are not here to eliminate your darkness. You are here to integrate it. That is the essence of individuation, not perfection, but wholeness. To welcome all that you are, even the uncomfortable parts. To say, yes, I have been angry. I have been afraid. I have made mistakes. And instead of hiding those truths, you hold them in the light and say, this too is me. Integration is the act of reconciliation within the soul. It is how you become complete. It's where the inner war ends, not because one side won, but because you learn to stop fighting yourself. This is the sacred power of solitude. It strips away distraction and reveals the inner landscape you've avoided. And only through that confrontation can healing begin. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's disorienting. Yes, there will be days when you question everything. But on the other side of that storm is a version of you that is no longer fragmented, no longer shaped by expectation, a soul that knows its name, a self that stands in its truth without apology. The unfolding of individuation is not the easiest path, but it is the most honest, the most courageous, and ultimately, the most liberating. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to remember who you've always been and to claim every piece of yourself as sacred. Imagine a woman named Elena, always praised for being polite, selfless, and accommodating. From childhood, she learned that love was earned by silencing her own needs and putting others first. But in her mid-30s, after a painful breakup and the sudden loss of her job, she found herself completely alone for the first time. At first, the silence was unbearable. She cried for days, not just for what she had lost, but for the years she had spent pretending to be someone she wasn't. In that solitude, long-buried anger began to rise, anger at how often she had betrayed herself just to be accepted. At first, she felt shame, but eventually, she allowed herself to feel that anger fully. She started journaling, setting boundaries, and saying no without guilt. She began painting again, something she gave up in her 20s because it was impractical. And slowly, as she honored both her pain and her passion, she stopped trying to be what others wanted and started becoming herself. This was her individuation, not some spiritual fantasy, but the real, raw work of reclaiming who she truly was. Number 4, transformation through stillness. In a world that glorifies constant movement, it's no surprise that people try to outrun solitude. We fill the quiet with noise, jump from one relationship to the next, scroll endlessly, attend every social event, all in an effort to escape being alone with ourselves. But the truth is, real transformation doesn't happen in the rush. It doesn't bloom in the chaos of distraction. It unfolds in stillness. True change takes root in the sacred silence of solitude. When we allow ourselves to sit in that silence without judgment, without escape, we begin to hear a different voice. Not the voice of the world, but the voice of our inner being. In that stillness, the deeper self awakens and begins to speak. It speaks in dreams that feel more vivid than waking life, in sudden insights that pierce through confusion, in emotions that rise without warning, asking not to be suppressed but understood. These experiences are not random. They are messages from the unconscious, guiding you to remember who you truly are beneath all the masks you've worn. In solitude, time slows down. The outer world fades, and the inner world comes alive. You begin to notice the rhythm of your breath, the loops of your thoughts, the quiet ache of your soul's true longings. You realize how long you've been carrying stories that were never truly yours. Stories like, "I'm not enough," "I'm too broken," "I don't belong." But in this sacred space, those old narratives begin to dissolve, not through force, but through the soft fire of truth. You begin to forgive yourself not just for what you've done, but for all the ways you abandoned yourself to please others. Stillness doesn't break you. It rebuilds you. It strips away the false identities and reveals the strength that's always been within. What once felt like emptiness becomes a container for healing, and from that quiet place, transformation rises not in noise, not in frenzy, but in quiet certainty. This is the power of solitude, not as punishment, but as a portal. If you've made it this far, it means something within you resonated with this message, something ancient, something sacred. Take a moment now to reflect. What has solitude revealed to you? Have you ever felt the silent pull of transformation in your quietest moments? We invite you to share your story in the comments below. Your words may be the light someone else is searching for. And if you're not sure what to say, simply type, "In stillness, I remember who I am." Let that be your affirmation, a signal to the universe that you are ready to embrace your inner truth. Number 5. The return, from fire to freedom. There comes a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when the long, quiet season of solitude begins to shift. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or some dramatic sign. It arrives softly, like a breeze nudging open a long-shut window. The silence that once felt like an unbearable weight on your chest now becomes something else entirely, a sacred sanctuary that has cradled your transformation. What once felt like exile now feels like preparation, and slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to emerge. But make no mistake, this return is not a return to your former self. You are not going back to who you were before the silence, before the ache, before the shedding. That version of you has dissolved in the fire of solitude. What rises now is something forged, something clearer and more rooted. You've been rewired from the inside out. The person re-entering the world now carries a deeper truth, a quieter power. Your task is no longer about healing the wound. Your task is integration, blending your internal transformation with your external reality. It's not about performing your growth for others. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. This isn't a public display of spiritual awakening. It's about embodying the truth you now carry and expressing it through your actions, your words, your choices. You begin to move through life not with urgency or force, but with intention. Every step becomes deliberate, every breath more aware. Your clarity cuts through the noise, not as a shout, but as a whisper that pierces more deeply than any scream. You no longer search for validation in the eyes of others. You've made peace with being unseen, knowing that your worth was never dependent on being noticed. You are no longer starved for attention because you have become full within yourself. Wholeness, not loneliness, now becomes the soil from which your relationships grow. You no longer choose connection out of desperation, but from alignment. You no longer abandon your truth to fit into places that were never meant to hold you. Your boundaries are now an act of love, not only for yourself, but for the sacredness of your journey. You speak less, but every word carries weight. You are no longer interested in small talk that drains your spirit. Your voice may be softer, but it vibrates with truth. It carries the essence of someone who has touched the bottom and risen without losing their light. You know now that strength does not have to roar. Sometimes, it simply stands firm, unshakable in the face of chaos. And as this inner world stabilizes, the outer world begins to respond. Not always quickly, not always obviously, but it begins to reflect back to you what you've anchored within. Opportunities come not because you chase them, but because you've become a magnet for them. Relationships shift, not because you force them, but because your frequency no longer supports what isn't real. You become the calm in the storm. You become the mirror that reflects truth. You become the sacred space that others feel but cannot explain. This is the return not to the world as it was, but to the world as it can now be, when you show up as who you truly are. Number 6. Solitude as a gift to others. The true culmination of solitude is not simply the deepening of self-awareness, it is the quiet, radiant gift of your presence. After walking through the silence, enduring the ache, and facing the mirrors that solitude offers, you don't just emerge with more knowledge of yourself. You return carrying something much rarer in today's world: stillness. In a culture addicted to speed, stimulation, and noise, a person who has been shaped by solitude becomes a living antidote. Your energy no longer contributes to the chaos. Instead, you become a lighthouse in the storm, a steady presence that reminds others of the peace they've forgotten is possible. You walk slower, you listen more. Your presence alone invites others to exhale, and without trying to fix or preach, you begin to shift the atmosphere around you. You no longer fear the silence. You've made a home in it. While others may run from stillness as if it were emptiness, you know its sacred depth. You don't need constant distraction to feel alive. You've met yourself in the quiet, and now the quiet feels like an old friend. When the world pulls you into noise, you return not to escape, but to remember, to restore, to reconnect with what is real. And this ability to return becomes your strength. It's not a retreat, it's a rhythm. You step into the world and give, and then you step back into the silence to refill. The difference now is that your solitude is not a wound or a sentence. It's a sanctuary, a source, a well you draw from so that what you offer to others is not born of depletion, but of depth. Your presence becomes a gift because it is anchored. Others may not be able to name what they feel around you, but they will feel safer, seen, less hurried, more human. And that, in itself, is a healing. You remind them that they too can find stillness inside themselves. You mirror the truth that presence does not require perfection, only willingness. And though your path of growth continues because transformation is never a one-time event, you are no longer afraid of the fire. You know now that the flames do not come to destroy, but to purify. You know how to walk through the heat and emerge whole. You've burned away the illusions. What remains is essence, unshakable, clear, kind. So yes, you will return to the fire again. You will face yourself again. But now you do so with reverence, not resistance. With a calm knowing, not fear. You've made peace with your own soul, and in doing so, you've become a quiet blessing to others, a reminder that solitude isn't loneliness. It's power, it's preparation, it's love in its most centered form. At Spiritual Universe, we believe solitude is not a punishment, it is a sacred passage. It is not exile, but transformation. In the stillness where the world falls silent, something deeper begins to speak. Not the noise of the ego, but the voice of the soul. This is where true awakening begins. We walk with those who have been shaped in the quiet, those who have chosen to stay when everything told them to run. Because in the silence, the fire burns not to destroy, but to refine. Solitude becomes the crucible in which you are not only healed, but made whole. We do not see solitude as something to escape. We honor it as a path back to truth, a return to essence, a homecoming to the self that has always been waiting beneath the noise. As you emerge from this sacred inner journey, you no longer need to seek approval or belonging. You carry your own light. You become a presence that brings peace without words, strength without force, and clarity without explanation. You are not here to fit in. You are here to illuminate. This is what we at Spiritual Universe stand for, guiding souls back to the truth of who they are, reminding you that you are not broken. You are becoming. You are not forgotten. You are being shaped. So as you step forward, remember this truth. You were never alone in your becoming. The universe was always conspiring for your return. And now, you rise not to chase the world, but to be a light within it. If this message resonates in your spirit, leave a comment below with the words, "I carry my solitude as a torch." Let this be your affirmation, your sacred vow to yourself, And to all those still finding their way home, be sure to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Universe. And when you're ready, continue your journey by watching the next video below. Your path of light has only just begun. Together, we are the flame.